Hello everyone, YouTube's biggest tease ruffled bricks here. Today we are finally doing what has been by far my most requested Worms Armageddon video to date. Mainly because I said I was going to do this video around 2 years ago and then I just buggered off to make a music review channel instead. You know what they say, you gotta go where the money isn't. But enough stalling. Today we are looking at a key feature of both intermediate mode and deathmatch speedruns, that being special weapons. More than just a lucky mascot you'd sit on the end of your desk on a game show, these 8 weapons are a key part of your gameplay tactics, giving you a chance to tailor your arsenal to your playstyle to give you a bespoke advantage in PvP matches. But of course, as a lowly speedrunner who can't be bothered to reach out to other human beings, I'm going to be talking about special weapons from the perspective of a speedrunner. Now, if you've watched any of my speedrun videos on this channel, you will know that I have historically had a bias towards one particular weapon out of the 8. So in order to try and make up for that, I did do some streams where I completed runs with alternative special weapons to my usual choice, and I even attempted a heinous endurance challenge in the form of a deathmatch all special weapons run, in which I attempted to complete deathmatch 8 times in a row in one sitting, each time with a different special weapon. I didn't complete the run, but I did raise money for charity, and isn't that the real achievement? So let's romp through the strengths and weaknesses of all 8 special weapons and rank them from worst to best, according to how quickly they can help you complete a run. Normally I do these in tier list format, but as there's only 8 here, I decided it would be better to just do it in the form of a straightforward worst to best list. I feel like tier lists are when you're too lazy to go through all of the options to figure out an order beforehand, but as there's so few here, I've got no excuse. And of course, if you do disagree with any of my rankings here, feel free to leave a comment below, especially if the video hasn't even finished yet. It will be infuriating for me to read, but my god will the algorithm lap it up. Probably. Alright, here we go. 2 years in the making, it's time for every special weapon in Worms Armageddon ranked from worst to best. Number 8. Mole Bomb. Yeah, didn't see this placement coming, did you? This one's kind of a shame because I really like the Mole Bomb as a concept. Small, fluffy, makes cute noises, looks like it can buff your shoe. For dapper furry points, they're rivaled only by the skunk. Upon launch, this tiny Wookiee runs along the ground, trying to jump over obstacles along the way. Then you hit space again and it jumps into the air in an arc that looks like he's trying to trace half the McDonald's logo. The moment the mole touches terrain, it starts digging. The moment the mole stops touching terrain, it stops digging. And if you want to detonate it at any point between it jumping and it naturally exploding, you just hit spacebar again. In the time it's taken me to explain that, you could have completed half a run. I will say that purely on a numbers basis, the Mole Bomb genuinely does have some advantages over any other special weapon. It's the only special weapon where you automatically start with 3 of them, compared to the 2 or 1 stock that you get for all the others. Another advantage is it's the only special weapon that has no delay whatsoever on its availability. You can literally whop out these sentient pom-poms on turn 1. But even with these numerical advantages, this weapon is pretty much useless for deathmatch speedruns. One of its less desirable unique characteristics as a special weapon is that it does absolutely sod all base damage. Pretty much the best offensive usage you can get from a Mole Bomb is digging a hole down to the water, and even then you'll need another turn to actually knock any of your enemies down that pretty annoyingly steep hole. There's just so many different problems with this weapon. The arc that it jumps at is so specific and obtuse. You'll either need to learn it really well or just operate it in a wide open space to get anything reliable out over it. Another weird kink this weapon has is if you try and launch the Mole Bomb when it's right next to you, it just annoyingly explodes in your face. Quite frankly, if you want to create a quick passage to the Moist Abyss, then you're better off hoping you get a Mole Squadron. The Mole Squadron has a much more direct angle, it's much easier to control, you can destroy much more terrain in the process, and genuinely create some good opportunities with it, even if it is one of the weakest super weapons. But honestly, whilst moles are a lot of fun to use in PvP matches, using it as your special weapon for a deathmatch speedrun is like picking Dan as your character in Street Fighter.
Oh you dozy bugger, oh you dozy pillock, oh you boring sod.
It's something you should only do if you're incredibly good at speedrunning, because otherwise you'll just be digging your own hole. Number 7. Super Sheep. Alright, hear me out. Okay, don't. I can already see half of you reaching for the comment section down there. Just cool it, alright? Just sit on your hands for a minute. I know you're all like, how dare you bricks? Super Sheep is the hero we all need in 2025. And I agree, I'm on your side, mate. Look, the fact of the matter is that Super Sheep genuinely is a pretty damn good weapon. With a fancy cape, no less. But, as we all know, not all heroes wear capes, so a third tap of the button will return the sheep to naked mode, so that it falls to earth and explodes upon impact with the ground. And just like with the mole bomb, a fourth tap will just blow it up instantly. Now of course, it is worth mentioning straight off the bat that the Super Sheep is not the easiest weapon to control. It travels at a fixed speed, and steering is done solely using the left and right keys. You're not so much leading the sheep as you are driving it. If you've ever played a top-down game with first-person steering mechanics like the first two GTA games or Micro Machines, or maybe even the missile bits from Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet, then you should have at least some transferable skills when you get the keys to Sean Plus here. There is also the Super Sheep Racing training module, which is very handy for getting used to its mechanics. But however you go about doing your driving tests, it is well worth it. The great advantage of the Super Sheep is that it can do chunky damage to worms in hard to reach places on the map, and it can also pick up Amazon deliveries along the way, which can be pretty helpful for shoring up your backup resources. And even if you want to use the sheep more like a normal one by just dropping it right where you stand, you can do so by just giving it the cape with one hand and taking it away with the other. It'll probably be a fairly self-destructive move, but when has that ever stopped you with a normal sheep? So I promise you it's not the awkward handling of the Super Sheep that's made me rank it as low as number 7 in this list. Nor is it the fact that the Aqua Sheep upgrade, which enables you to swim the sheep underwater, is not available for Deathmatch. Nor is it the fact that the moment you launch the Super Sheep you can kiss goodbye to any retreat time, due to your controls immediately being mapped onto the sheep. No, the fatal flaw of the Super Sheep is that you have to wait until turn 8 before you can use it. Just for reference, that's the exact same amount of delay as you have on the Napalm Strike. Obviously that's fine for PvP games because all of those are 4 hours long, but for a deathmatch speedrun that is unacceptable. In fact, for big chunks of the game it effectively means that you are playing it without a special weapon because your one's effectively still getting changed in the phone box. And if you're thinking, well that's fine, I'll just find one in a crate instead. Yeah, crate weapons are also subject to the same delay, so whilst this brave cloud on legs may have significant benefits for a leisurely paced battle against your friends, for speedrunning it certainly won't shepherd you to victory. Number 6. Flamethrower. This is the default special weapon in Worms Armageddon, the one that you'll end up with if you don't bother adjusting the option in your team's menu. And as such, it's a special weapon that you have to use if you do the quick game speedruns, so there is plenty of incentive to learn how to use this one. It's also the special weapon that all the AI teams have, which sucks for them, given that they're not actually programmed to use it. Flamethrower has some interesting, unique properties as a special weapon. It's the only special weapon that doesn't deliver any kind of explosion. Instead, its offense is entirely fire-related. And fire, as you should all know, has two main properties. 1, it can cook your dinner, and 2, it will make worms jump around in pain. Now, you get 5 seconds worth of continuous firepower out of this weapon, which means it does have a bunch of situational uses. It can be pretty good for plopping worms on awkward terrain like grass maps, where your usual pushing tools like Uzi or longbow or prod might come a cropper to the unkempt gardens. But the flamethrower generally does well to make worms airborne, and the prolonged flow of the weapon means that you can keep pushing them until they go in, so even if they get snagged on first hit, all is not lost. You can also move the flamethrower up and down while it's firing, meaning that you can potentially tackle a wide spread of worms who you need to pile or plop. And one other cool function of the flamethrower is that it's one of only 2 special weapons whose base damage can reduce an enemy worm from full health to 0. If you've got a worm holed up in a corner with a comfortable downstream trajectory, then the sheer amount of concentrated flaming can do over 100 damage in one sitting. However, just as fire can be a little unpredictable in everyday life, so too can it be in Worms Armageddon. Partly in relation to the direction and height that the worms jump as a result of singeing their toes, and partly due to the flames being affected by wind. These factors can make it quite difficult to control the outcome of plop attempts, where worms might end up jumping maybe further or in slightly different directions to the way that you want. The biggest drawback with Old Smoky though is if you're using it for a one-shot, it only really works on one worm at a time. Kind of like the Dragon Ball, each flame can only interact with one worm at a time, so if you've got a pile of 2, 3 or 4 worms in a corner that you want to try in one shot, forget it. Their damage is just going to get distributed irritatingly and unevenly like a badly cut pizza, and you'll be much better off trying to find a minigun in a crate to use for that purpose. So some good bennets from the Peri Peri sauce dispenser here, but not really a weapon that's going to set the world on fire. Number 5. Holy Hand Grenade. The only weapon in the game inspired by Monty Python, unless you replace the Concrete Donkey's graphic file with a foot. It's also one of the only weapons that has a catchy theme tune that everyone loves to sing along to.
I heard there was a secret code.
So this weapon has advantages in terms of iconicness at least. Now the HHG's main benefit is that it has the biggest explosion out of any of the special weapons. Whereas most of the explosive special weapons have a blast radius of up to 75 damage, HHG has been configured to up to 100. It should be stressed that due to the explosions being slightly nerfed after Worms 2, that it's pretty unlikely that you will ever get 100 base damage from just the grenade itself, and you'll be looking more likely at something in the 85 to 95 range. Nonetheless though, the fact that it can't necessarily one-shot an enemy in the same manner as a flamethrower should not put you off the Lord's favourite projectile, because that huge crater that it leaves is literally a godsend. It enables you to plop enemy worms who are perhaps a little higher above the water than most chonky explosions will allow, and in terms of launching worms, it's like your own portable NASA. For plopping, for damage, and for holy wars, the effects are pretty heavenly. Hence, you might be wondering why this is only in the bottom half of my ranking list. And you know, there are some practical issues with the Holy Hand Grenade. One quirk is that even though it has a 3-second timer, the Holy Hand Grenade will not explode until it settles and finishes singing. So unlike normal grenades or banana bombs where you can time them to explode while they're falling, Holy Hand Grenade has to come to a complete standstill before it can wreak ungodly havoc. It also has a 3-second retreat time, which is fine for most weapons, but with one this powerful, it can make it more difficult to use at close range without significantly injuring yourself. But the real reason this has such a low ranking in this list is pretty much the same as the Super Sheep, in that you have to wait until turn 5 for this one to become available, which is a slightly better trade-off and doesn't make it as useless as the Super Sheep, but it is still pretty annoying in a deathmatch speedrun. That said, there is an increased chance that you'll get these in a crate every now and then, given that most battles will go on for enough turns to allow one to spawn, and if that's the case, then you can take your enemies straight to church. But in terms of using this as your default special weapon, the Lord works in slightly too mysterious ways for my liking. Number 4. Old Woman. This was probably the hardest ranking to decide on between this and the Holy Hand Grenade, and if you're going to complain about the fact that this one's higher, then all I can say is you're ageist and sexist and you learnt all the wrong lessons from Jesus. It is fair to say that Old Woman is probably the most basic special weapon of the bunch. No offence, Nan. In terms of how it operates, you ever use dynamite? Well, imagine if you place a dynamite, but that dynamite slowly hobbles away from you with a walking stick, whilst complaining about the price of groceries and the state of modern music. Oh, in my day we had proper musicians like Ice Spice. Now this does mean that you'll need to learn the distance that your nana here will be comfortable walking. Something to note is that the Old Woman walks at the same speed as a worm. So if you walk 5 seconds away from an enemy worm, then turn and release your old deer on them, you should get it dead on, provided you've counted your 1000s correctly. There is one caveat here, which is that falling off a ledge will notably speed up the Old Woman's horizontal trajectory, because you know how the elderly are with their centres of gravity. So you'll have to factor that in if you are using her to attack an enemy from a higher vantage point. Ultimately though, Old Woman doesn't really have that many benefits over the dynamite. She's less precise, so much like your own grandparents, best to generally only assign her to simple and not too technical tasks. Hence, throwing her down a narrow hole or using her for plops can be pretty potent. Another way she differs from Dynamite is that you only get 3 seconds of retreat time with Granny compared to the 5 that you get from the red stick. So if you're using her at close range, it might be harder to avoid the backsplash. I might be doing too many old people jokes here. But to be honest, Old Woman would easily be lower than Holy Hand Grenade on this list if it wasn't for the fact that, unlike the Lord, she actually gets up on time, with the 1 turn delay making her much more suited for speedrun combat. So yeah, this weapon won't knock your socks off, but she might knit you a pair of new ones. Number 3. Sheep Launcher. One for the unethical circus fans here, Sheep Launcher is a kind of middle ground weapon. Shorter range than a super sheep, but longer range than a normal sheep. To be honest, despite the fancy health and safety headgear that your fluffy friend is wearing, this operates mostly exactly the same as a regular sheep. But that said, firing them out of a cannon does give you some notable benefits. The power at which they fire is fixed, and the speed that they fly out is fairly severe, so trying to time the trigger explosion of a flying sheep is something you'll probably need practicing to get good at. But just like the Super Sheep, whilst this is a tough mutton chop to control, the rewards are very much worth it. For starters, you can use them to sheep a close range enemy without taking full damage yourself. You can do what I like to call the uppercut, where you effectively just power punch them into the sea from a high platform, and this particular move can double up really nicely with low grav. As it stands though, for all the applications you can get out of using this to get sheep in harder to reach places, one of the real benefits of this one is that if you fire it directly upwards or downwards or drop it off a ninja rope, it's effectively just a spare sheep. And firing upwards can be useful if you don't want to suicide your own worm, as it gives you a little bit of time for jumping out of the epicenter of the blast. But yeah, this is basically just a normal sheep, but they fly in first class rather than economy. It doesn't have the range of a super sheep, but in some ways it's a little more versatile, and it only has a 1 turn delay, meaning that you're far more likely to actually get some use out of it. So yeah, the additional cannon launches this one straight to number 3 for me. Number 2. Homing Pigeon. So here we have Pidgey, effectively the sentient midpoint between the homing missile and Patsy's magic bullet. The pigeon has greater intelligence than the homing missile in that, unlike the former, it can use its brain power to avoid crashing into terrain by flapping its way around it. Unlike the magic bullet, however, it doesn't necessarily take corners quite so smoothly, and there are numerous things that can cause it to go off course, like loose pixels, caverns, thinking that it's left the oven on, the threat of Dick Dastardly and Muttley. So although it is a little more reliable than you might expect from an ancient Egyptian form of courier, and certainly a better delivery service than Every, there can be a significant risk of wasting your time if you try and give the bird too difficult a journey. As such, it's better for simpler, short to mid-range tasks, kind of like a flying old woman. Imagine if the two of those weapons teamed up. What a great display team that would be. So direct close range shots, dropping pigeons off of ninja ropes, or the occasional relatively basic long distance tasks are your best bet for this weapon. So you may be thinking, bricks, if its orienteering skills are that unreliable, why have you put this weapon at number 2? Well, this is an instance where for speedrunning it effectively comes down to a numbers game. And there is one very specific edge that the homing pigeon has over many of the other weapons in this list, which is that you get 2 of them as a default. Not entirely sure why, it might be Team 17's way of apologising for its iffy homing abilities, kind of like when Amazon sends you a voucher for money off a box of wine. But for speedrunning, this is quite a game changer. Your biggest time-saving resource in these runs for the most part are the chonky weapons, the ones where the explosions do up to 75 damage and tear sizable holes out of the landscape. And just the sheer fact that you get 2 pigeons compared to 1 sheep launcher or 1 old woman gives you a notable advantage over those weapons. The catch is you do have to wait 2 turns for these to unlock compared to the usual 1, but the increased firepower just about means that the bird is the word. Although if I'm being picky, there is one numerical drawback with this weapon, which is that you can only use 1 per turn.
Oh my god! I can't believe this!
Which, let's be honest, is a limitation that you'll experience with most weapons in the game. Apart from number 1. Mad cows. Yeah, incredibly predictable, I know, and I promise you, I genuinely did my best to find ways in which the other special weapons could bully this one out of top position, but I was not successful. It's interesting because the cows are not especially sophisticated as a weapon. Unlike other animal-based weapons, jumping is neither their forte nor their hobby. They just run along the ground and then explode upon impact with almost anything vaguely resembling a wall. So many of the other special weapons do technically have advantages over this one when it comes to distance. But since their inception in Worms 2, their big benefit is that mad cows are designed to be released in a herd of up to 5 at a time, and possibly because of that you get access to 2 of them as a special weapon. And because of the ability to release them both together, then that gives you a core advantage over the pigeons when it comes to speeding up deathmatch. For starters, it means that you can one-shot enemy worms who are up against the wall, and unlike the one-on-one fussiness of the flamethrower, the chunky explosions from the cows give you way more scope to kill off numerous enemy worms all at once. You also make a big staircase hole by doing that, meaning that you can plop the worms, which is obviously a quicker kill. But the nuances of the herding mechanic means they are just so much more versatile than the other special weapons. You can send the cows in 2 different directions at once by turning before you release the second cow, meaning that you can take out enemies on different parts of the map. Using this method, you can attempt a trick called the Venn diagram, where you attempt to crash cows into terrain simultaneously right next to each other, resulting in an overlapping pair of explosions that can do serious damage. You can launch cows whilst jumping or falling or while swinging on a ninja rope in order to send the cows down different paths on the vertical axis. You can even use the first cow sacrificially to remove terrain and let the second cow drop in to deal with lower ranks. And hell, if you don't want to use both of them on the same turn, you don't have to. If you've got 2 different targets on the map that you need to save chonkies for, you can switch the herd number down to 1, and that will save the second cow for a later turn. There is such a range of utility for the cows that as a default special weapon, none of the rest even come close. However, don't let that fool you into thinking that the cows are in any way faultless, as one-shotting a worm against the wall requires both cows to hit the worm directly. Vigorous sliding or bouncing around the terrain can result in the second cow missing entirely or the enemy worm's hitbox to be somewhat absent. There's also the occasional irritating bit of RNG in the cow's movement, which means that sometimes when it reaches that 5-pixel hurdle it might make its way over it or it might not. Depending on what side of the bed you got out of that morning, it could be 50-50 as to whether they clear it or blow up on it. And then there is the dreaded cow turnaround, whereby if a cow collides with a wall whilst in midair, there is a 6.25% chance that they will change direction. And when that happens, you really won't have a cow, man. So there are risks that deathmatch speedrunners should be very aware of, but even factoring all those in, they are still significantly better than any other special weapon for deathmatch speedruns. And coupled with the fact that they become available on turn 2, and that any crates containing cows will give you 3 more of them for your arsenal, it's pretty hard to deny that the cows are the GOAT. So, that is my ranking of all of the special weapons in Worms Armageddon from worst to best. Very much, it should be restated from the perspective of a speedrunner. And I don't know about you, but I'm very disappointed with the outcome. I need to make it clear because there are some weapon placements in this list that I genuinely resented doing. Like, there are weapons like Super Sheep and Holy Hand Grenade that I enjoy using far more than Old Woman or Homing Pigeon, but little things like multi-turn delays and numbers of weapons, much as they might offer a more balanced experience for multiplayer games, result in some infuriating nerfing when it comes to speedrunning. So do let me know in the comments below what you think of this ranking, and if you could make any changes to how these special weapons are calibrated in Worms Armageddon, like whether you would change the delay or the amount or whatever. Love to hear your thoughts. In the meantime, thanks for watching, I hope the wait was worth it, and if you want to support this channel then please do subscribe, feel free to donate via Ko-fi, and check out the other stuff I do as well. This video is over.